Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Wednesday everybody. Once again, I am filming in a different location today. My office has construction next door. There's a bit of an echo in this room. Hopefully it's not too distracting. My apologies in advance. A lot has happened over the last 24 hours. We need to cover updates related to real estate and the wider economy. These are important as they signal just how concerning and desperate the property situation is becoming in some parts of the country, putting renewed pressure on policymakers. US outlet Bloomberg reports that housing sales in China's biggest cities is losing momentum less than 2 weeks after authorities loosened mortgage restrictions, quote, raising doubts over whether the steps are enough to revive the market before a crucial busy season, end quote. The Bloomberg analysts used unofficial data collected by industry watchers within China itself to make these observations. For example, estimates by Zentling Group analyst Zhang Dawei found that, quote, even in Beijing, which reacted the most to the stimulus, sales of existing homes plunged to 35% to about 1,700 units last weekend from 2,600 in the weekend immediately after the easing, end quote. According to China Index Holdings, in Shenzhen, new home sales edged up 3.8% last week from a week earlier. However, they continued to slide in Shanghai and Guangzhou, adding, quote, across China, transactions continued to drop, falling more than 20% by area, end quote. What is most concerning about these observations is that so-called Tier 1 cities are supposed to be the strongest markets for real estate, with lower-tier cities facing the worst headwinds. It was the hopes of policymakers that the first-tier cities could fill the gap from the, frankly, very poor performance of lower-tier cities. If the Tier 1 cities lose momentum, then the national housing market will be in very dire straits. This also indicates that Beijing's support measures are still having little effect. Quote, the mortgage relaxation is showing a positive effect in the sense that the housing market is rebounding slightly, but the current supportive measures aren't enough to push the market to bottom out, end quote. Others agree. Quote, these measures mark a significant step towards stimulating the property sector and the broader economy, but we think they are still not enough. Beijing may have to introduce more aggressive easing measures to ensure a real recovery, end quote. Of course, we know why Beijing is so hesitant. The fear is that too much stimulus will exacerbate the even more concerning issue of debt and China's poor local fiscal situation. There is also the concern that removing all restraints on property across the country risks a speculative explosion of activity, which greatly increases the risk of wider financial crisis. Despite all this, however, the speculative market on the equity side is still quite hopeful. A Bloomberg gauge of Chinese developer shares has gained about 14% since policymakers announced the latest round of support measures on the 31st of August. Though we also note on this point that according to a September installment of a Bank of America monthly poll, 1/3 of US fund managers named Chinese commercial real estate as the most likely source of a systemic credit event, with the proportion more than doubling since last month to surpass concerns over US commercial property. Meanwhile, some localities are becoming especially desperate. Chinese financial media outlet Yicai writes this week that Guangzhou, also known as Canton in English, in the heart of the Pearl River Delta, quote, is likely to become the first of China's first-tier cities to lower the minimum interest rate on mortgages offered to first-time home buyers to below the central bank's benchmark loan prime rate, end quote. In recent days, the city of Nanjing, provincial capital of wealthy Jiangsu province, which hugs Shanghai, announced that it has fully lifted housing purchase requirements. And then there's Zhengzhou, population 11 million, provincial capital of the massive and poor Henan province, which this week also announced the complete removal of housing purchase restrictions. This was just 5 weeks after rolling out various stimulus measures, including reductions in mortgage rates and down payment ratios, cuts in housing transaction taxes, and home buying subsidies for families with more than one child. Quote, these measures in Zhengzhou 5 weeks ago were clearly not enough, so now they are dropping all the housing purchase restrictions. These moves smack of desperation, and so far appear to be having much less effect than hoped for, or they would have had in previous cycles. End quote. Finally, while we're on the economy and real estate, in a sign of just how concerned people are about the current state of affairs, flagship state-run outlet Xinhua published a special commentary with the disquieting title, "The Chinese economy is not crisis-ridden." The wording of the title alone is very telling. Quote, in August, consumer inflation returned to positive territory on a year-on-year basis. The producer price index also edged up on a monthly basis last month. What the world needs is a responsible and objective analysis of the Chinese economy, rather than morbid scaremongers who exaggerate the negatives while filtering out or diluting the positives. All these positive signs would hardly make people draw the conclusion that the Chinese economy is experiencing some sort of crisis in confidence or growth, as claimed by analysts who ignore facts or reporters wearing blinkers. End quote. And then there is this commentary from this week. Quote, this perspective can explain the phenomenon in which the US is bad-mouthing the Chinese economy in a collective manner, and can also roughly predict the US's future actions towards China, indicating that it aligns with the basic facts. From this perspective, all kinds of negative comments are actually a cognitive and psychological warfare launched by the US and the West against China, targeting the confidence in China's economy, both domestically and internationally. End quote. Something tells me that the writers of these commentaries do not enjoy China Update, but nevertheless I remain committed to providing you all with daily updates on what is really going on the ground in China, economically and politically, based on sober and grounded analysis, no matter the risk. If you too support that objective and you're enjoying today's episode of China Update, don't forget to hit the like button. Liking, sharing and subscribing all help the channel grow and be shown to new people. And if you want to go the extra mile and financially support the channel so that I can continue providing this deep analysis on what is really going on in China every day, open and free for all, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. Thank you so much, everybody, for supporting me and allowing me to continue producing these episodes of China Update. Next up, the UK appears to have a very serious alleged PRC spying/influence scandal on their hands. UK-based The Telegraph reports the news that, quote, security services suspect a number of Chinese agents to be working in Westminster and are planning to use the National Security Act passed this summer to detain them. End quote. The Act introduced an offence of foreign interference, making it illegal for spies to meddle in elections or disrupt the workings of parliamentary democracy in the UK. Working covertly for a foreign hostile power will now become a criminal offence, the outlet writes. This could all well mutate into a serious political scandal too. Yesterday, Tuesday, UK-based The Times broke the news that MI5 secretly warned the Conservative Party that, quote, 2 of its potential candidates to become MPs could be spies for the Chinese state. End quote. The outlet was told that the security service contacted the party about 2 individuals in 2021 and 2022 and advised that they should not be on the central list of candidates. MI5 is said to have raised concerns that the individuals, quote, had links to the United Front Work Department, a body charged with influencing global policy and opinion. End quote. The individuals were blocked from the list for the general elections. And of course, this is going to put more pressure on the already strained UK-China relationship. On Monday, a senior UK minister, Cabinet Office Minister Oliver Dowden, said that there was a strong case for new action against Beijing explaining that ministers were looking at whether to include China in an enhanced tier of countries under the government's new National Security Act. UK-based Financial Times explains that including China could result in, quote, anyone working in Britain at the direction of China having to identify themselves on a UK foreign influence registration scheme or face up to 5 years in jail. Such a scheme could cover thousands of people, including those employed by Chinese companies, end quote. Of course, Chinese state media's reaction to all this has been its usual mix of disdain and derision, but it is important that we take note of how these developments are being framed and communicated by Chinese state media within the country and to an international audience. Quote, in the US and the UK, there are individuals or forces who specialize in sabotaging relations with China. They launch political witch hunts within their own countries with a focus on targeting individuals who hold friendly or rational attitudes towards China. End quote. And in another piece from the same outlet, quote, some Chinese experts said on Tuesday that continuing hyping up those spy allegations reflected the existing undercurrents of anti-China force in the British politics, which aim to weaponize the allegations to sabotage the already vulnerable bilateral relations. This only shows the poisonous atmosphere of McCarthyism that has arisen in the UK in order to silence those advocating a balanced view on Beijing. End quote. Of course, we note that this same state-run outlet has published a series of articles in recent months about alleged US spies arrested in China and warned of the great national security risks posed by Five Eyes espionage, which includes the UK. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a wonderful Wednesday, and I will see you all tomorrow.